Good morning, everybody. What I'm going to do today, we're gonna solve a problem called a BMI problem, and to give you an introduction of JavaScript and maybe cascading style sheets. This is what we will produce. This is the screen that we have, and you enter the weight, you enter the height, you click on the BMI. It calls a JavaScript function. In the JavaScript function, it does some calculation. First, it does some checking to make sure everything is okay. Then it does some calculation, and then it displays the result. All right. The starting file is already in the G drive. You can copy the starting file, so you don't have to start from scratch, but I'll still explain what you see in here. Okay. So if we go to the file itself, we have an HTML5 file. We have in the heading, we have the title, and then we have our own style. So what we're doing here, I'm defining styles for the body, for the div, and for the heading. For the body, we have a background color. I don't know what this color is, but you can figure it out. For the div, which is this part that you see in here, this is your div. Okay, it looks like it's almost like a page color in the background. Okay, the div is this part that you're gonna see here. Okay, so if we go back to the Dreamweaver, the div has a border of 2 points, and the color is F69. The padding is 10x and 10y, 40y. That means when I start typing in the div, it actually gives me spaces from the top and the bottom. The background is pink, as you saw. I didn't do this, so one of you did that, so that's why it's pink. I would not use pink color. The width of the div is 300 points. The border radius is 1 point. Now the radius, you see that here. If I want to make it rounded, I will make the radius bigger. So if I wanted to make it not this shape, if I go back to here and I say, look, I wanted to make the radius 20 degree, okay, and I'd save it, and we go back here and do refresh. Maybe not. Did I not showing it? Let me see here. I was opening a different file. So you see that here now the angle, the border looks different. All right, because I increase the angle of the radius. Now it's up to you what design you want, but I think this looks good like that. Okay. If we go back, let's look at the other options. The shadow is this. The first thing is for your X, Y, and the blur, the shadow blur. Now if I put for X, if I want to put, for example, 20 for X, and then do save again, go back in here and do refresh, you saw that the X shadow is more. The Y shadow still the same. So you can decide on how do you want to do the X or the Y shadow. Now the color is what? Gray. You can also decide on the color. For example, if I don't want this, let's just try different color. Okay, we'll go back to this. If I put red, for example, okay, and see what happens. You go back and do this. Now I got, looks ugly, but at least you have control on the colors. Okay, if you do control Z, and then we'll make that 10 as it was. Okay, the text align and these, if how I want to align this div in my body, in the form. Notice it was in the middle of your HTML page. To do that, you say text align center. The margin is right auto, and the margin left is auto. That way, if you increase or decrease the size of your browser, it still stays in the middle. Is that clear? So if I go like this, you see it's what? It's moving with my page. That's why I have the auto. Let's do a refresh here. So we don't have, I guess it's not refreshing. Okay. Did I change it? I didn't save it here. Okay, so we don't have that. We have the gray color. Okay. So that's why you have that auto margin. It allows you, as you make the screen bigger or smaller, it stays in the center. All right. What else do we have? We have in the heading, I chose this color for the heading 1, and the alignment of the heading is center. So I have 3 style sheets: body, div, and the heading. My own definition of my own formatting. Okay, now let's take a look at the HTML. The HTML, we have a div. So the style applied to this div is what? Is the style that we defined here. The form, inside the div, we have a form. We have a heading, BMI, and this will have that our own design, which we said that the color is red and it's center. We have a label called weight. Inside of that, you have an input field. The type is what? Weight. The type is weight, and the height is weight. That should be text. Okay. Those should be text. Okay. And this should be text too. All right. And we have the name is weight and the ID is weight. What we are interested in is this thing called the ID, because this is done in Dreamweaver. That's why it was done in Dreamweaver in the design. So I have an ID called weight and an ID called height. Those are important to us. Why those are important? Because we want to access them in our JavaScript. We call this like DOM object, like document objects, things that exist on your document. All right? And we have 2 buttons, a button called BMI, and when I click on it, we have a function called what? BMI calculate. We don't have that function, so we need to define that function. And we have a reset to reset the fields on the document. Okay? Now we start with our script. We need, in your script, JavaScript, it depends on what you want to do. Like when we did with the canvas, in the canvas, if you have variables that are used in different functions, in many functions, where do we define them? We define them at the beginning here. That way, they are global variables, can be used inside the function without me have to redefine them and repeat the code again. We don't have that in this scenario. All the calculation should happen where? Inside the function. So I need to call a function. I need to create a function called BMI calc. Now, a lot of people make mistakes with the typing, especially here in the JavaScript. In the JavaScript, yeah, there is a little bit of syntax checking, but it's not 100%. So what do you need to do? You need to minimize the errors. How do you minimize the errors? You make sure, for example, if I type this BMI calc here, instead of making a spelling mistake, I do control copy here, and I just go into the script and type in function. And what do I do? Control V. Now I guarantee that the name that I entered, is the same name as the one that listed in the button. All right. In the code, what usually you do inside the coding? You do the following step. First thing we say, we get the input. I'm going to write them and then we're going to follow them. Get the input. Second thing you do is that what? You convert to numbers if needed. If needed. Why is that step? Because if you want to do any calculation, you have to have numbers. You cannot just do it on text fields. The last thing I need, after this, I need to validate my inputs. The next thing I do is what? Depending on the validation, if no errors, if error, what do? We have, if error, display inform user. If no error, what do I do? Process. And display result. Why do I do this? Why am I doing this? Why am I putting a plan? So I can follow this plan without having to think about the solution. Alright? طيب. We'll start with the first one, getting the input. How to get the input? I have two fields on the screen. What are the two fields? W, var, I'm going to call it W, var, W equal to what? I'm going to call it W text. So I distinguish between the text field and the numbers. So var the text equal what? Equal document dot what? Get element by ID. What ID we use? The one that we have above. Again, to minimize the error, what do? Just to make sure I am on the right side, I'm not making mistake. Control copy, and I go in here and do what? Control V. And then close the bracket. I got the first one. Then I do the same thing. Copy this, control copy, and then control V. Instead of W text, I'm going to call it what? H text. And بدل الweight, what do we have? The height. Again, I go in here, control copy, and then I do here, control V. So I got my input. We're done with the first step. Okay, I got my input. This is my first step. What's the next step? Convert numbers if we need to. Do we need to convert it to numbers or not? We need to. Why? Because these are numbers. We need to perform calculations. So how do we convert to numbers? You can say var W equal parse what? What? Parse what? Int. If it was integer, you can say parse double if it's double. Okay, int give you what? It only give you the integer values. So in here we say, what is the element that we need to convert? One of these fields, those two fields. So I'm going to take this one, control copy, put it here, and then to get the value, I have to use something dot value. That will give me the value that was entered. So I'll take the value that was entered and convert it to what? To a number. And then I repeat the same thing for what? For the second one. So I do control copy, and then we do control V. I don't like this. They're not aligned. So we have to align them. Okay. All right. Instead of W, what do we put? We call it H, and instead of W here, we call it H. So now I got my input, I converted. The next step is that I validate my what? My inputs. So I do control I'll do control V here. How do we validate? Now this validation depends on the situation. It depends on the problem that you have and the input that you have. So you decide. The user have to enter the weight and the height. Can the user enter negative numbers? You don't have a negative weight or a negative height, or a zero weight or a zero height. So you want to make, the first thing, the easiest thing to do, you want to make sure that the user enters something positive, right? Now that positive number, you can say, okay, well, maybe they should enter something higher than 10 kilogram or higher than whatever it is. The height should be over 50 centimeter. Well, you can decide on that. These are your business logic. If you're doing an application for a bank or anything like that, usually you're given these rules, and then you will implement these rules inside your program. So how am I going to do this? Because we have two fields, there's a possibility that the error can happen in two places. So instead of displaying two error messages, one for each field, I want to make one error message and then we display it when we need it. How do I do this? I display a variable called error message. Okay? And I say equal to blank to start with, like that. Now there's different ways to validate, but this is one way to validate. What do I do next? I say, if I find an error here, I add an error message to the message. If I find an error here, I add an error message to the message. And at the end, I check, do I have an error or not? And if I don't have, do I have an error or not? If I have an error, we'll display an alert. Otherwise, I do the calculation. So now what do? I want to do if statement. If W is less than or equal to 0, it means what? We have an error. Okay? I'm going to say error message equal, we'll make it fancy like that, or just leave it, just put like an asterisk next to it. Error message, what? We say it cannot, weight cannot equal to 0. Okay? Cannot be negative. Okay? All right. Now this will initialize it to this, but the proper way of doing it, I know this is because it's the first message, we'll just add it. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to do it, we concatenate it to the error message. So we say error message equal error message plus this message. So it will be easier to do it on the next one. All right. What else I want? I want, if I see an error at the end, I want to put a new line. So I will put /n. /n means, in the coding, in JavaScript, it means go to the next line. Okay? All right? So we're done with the first error message. Now, no need for curly brackets here. Why? Because I have only one thing to do. So usually some people, you'll see that they'll have a curly bracket here and curly bracket here, and then you put that in between. That's fine. This would work. But because we have one statement only, I don't need those curly brackets. I'll do it two ways so you can see. The next thing I need to do, I'll copy this, control copy, and then control V. And instead of W, what do we put? H. And then here when all, instead of weight, what do we put? Height cannot be negative. Here, no need for a new line, because this would be the last message. But if you want to leave it, you can leave it. Now what do? I've done few steps. I want to test at least this part work. If I enter negative number, I should get an alert. Okay, so what do? After this checking, so we're done the checking, here's the checking. I need to check, do I have an error or not? How do I check if I have an error or not? So we check here, do you see that step? It says if error, inform user. So I'm going to control copy and put it in here. And I say if error message does not equal to blank. What does that mean? If it's not equal to blank, what does that mean? When we started, what was the error? What was in the error message? Blank or not blank? Blank. When it does not have a blank? When we have either an error here or an error here. So now I check. If there's no blank, it means that I have an error. And if I have an error, I inform the user. So what do we put in here? Alert. Alert what? Error message. You got the idea? Yes? Now let's run it and see what happens. Preview in Chrome. Save yes. Now if I enter -3 or -4 here and I did calculate, I got what? Weight cannot be negative, height cannot be negative. So at least that works. Now let's test it one more, because we did check two things. If I have only error in one, for example, if I put some value here and I put calculate BMI here, I will get only the height. So that works. When you're writing program, that's what you should do. You should test incrementally. You do something, then you test to make sure that part works. Then you continue. You guarantee that from that point you have no error. From that point backward, you have no error. Otherwise, if you just typing, and then you test the solution at the end, then you will have lots of errors. You give up, and you don't know how to solve the problem. You got the idea? So now if I have, okay, now let's see if I type in another value here. If I do BMI, I shouldn't get anything. No error. And that's where we should do what? The processing. Is that clear? So if we have an error, we inform the user. Otherwise, if there's no error, what do? We process. We process. If no error, what do? We process and display result. How do we process? What is the equation for the BMI? If I don't know, I can go on the net and find what are the equations. Now this is done before, so let's check what the equation is. The equation is equal to height divided by height square. That's your equation. So I'm going to copy this and put it in my code. You say variable BMI equal the weight. Mind the weight هون أنا. What did I do? I defined what? W here, right? We defined two variables here. What are the two variables? W and H. So I have W, and here we have H times H. That's your equation. Now, these equations usually are given. You don't come up with these equations. Somebody give you what these equations are. Okay? Now, all I want, I can just display the BMI and see what we get. Otherwise, what do you have to do? You will have to do the other part, which we will do in a minute. Okay. So here we'd say, if I do alert, let's just check it, see if it works. Alert, alert, and then we say your BMI alert, your BMI is what's going on here? I keep touching the mouse pad here. Your BMI is, and then you concatenate the result, which is BMI. So we have an error, we do this. Otherwise, we do calculation and display the result. But this is not the result we want. We want to say whether you are normal weight, overweight, or underweight. Okay, so if I test this right now, Control S, and I go back to the Chrome, if I test this and I do this, we have to, let's do it, preview in Chrome. If I type in, for example, what is a kilogram, let's say 75, and for the centimeter, the weight in centimeter, let's say 160. Okay. If I do BMI, I got this BMI, but I'm getting it into what percentage? I got this 0.00, right? We need to multiply it by 100 to get the result properly. But even that, there's a problem with the equation. This equation is not correct. Let's make sure that we got the right equation. Okay, so www, let me pause it for a minute. All right. We found the problem. The problem is that we're entering the values are in centimeter, but the equation requires this in meter. So what we have to do for the h, which is this, I need to convert it to centimeters, to meters, sorry. So I need to convert the height, to what? To meters. How do we do that? We say h equal h divided by 100. Okay? واضح? طيب. Now the equation should work. Before I do that, you saw that we were getting those a lot of decimal points after the BMI. We want to limit that. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to say 2 fixed, and then I will put how many decimals do I want after that. Okay, now we will continue with this. What we have is that we added one more thing, اللي هو formatting your output. So we want it to be only 2 decimal points. So what you can use, BMI dot 2 fixed bracket, and then how many digits do you want in between. So what I want to do here, if you display it, you will see that you don't get those trailing decimal digits. Right, now I want to do the result. To do the result, I want to see what is the value, and then based on that value, we'll have to say whether you are underweight, normal, or overweight. And to do this, there is rules to do for that. For example, if you say if you are less than 19, you're underweight. If the result, if you're between 19 and 25, then you are what? Healthy. If you are over 25, what you are is what? Overweight. And if you are above 30, you are obese. Okay? Now you can do it with multiple alert, or you can do it with a message like we did with the error message, and then display the message at the end. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to define a var called result message. Okay? Equal to blank. And then I will check if BMI less than 19, what? Underweight, right? So the message should include in it, the message should say, result message should say what? Equal your BMI is your BMI is and then here I have to use concatenation, so I'll concatenate this here, control copy like that, and then I will add a message. Here I will put a new line, so the BMI will appear on one, or you don't need to do it, just say, we'll just say underweight, okay, underweight. Okay. So the message will have two parts in it. It will have your BMI is, and then the value with 2 decimal points, and it will have the message underweight, right? Now, because the font is too big, you'll see that there. Next, it's not going to look good, but we will say else if the BMI is what? Less than 19, if it is less than 19, otherwise it's above 19 but it's less than 25. So we say if it is basically BMI less than 25, معناتها what does that mean? That means you are healthy. Okay, so I'll repeat the same thing. I'll copy the same thing, control copy, and there's a better way than to do this, but all right, leave it as it is. And then I'll just paste this here. Okay. And I'll just copy this, control copy, control V. If it's above 35, if it is above 25, so it's between 25 and 30. What is, so this should, sorry, this is saying you're healthy, right? Healthy. Okay. Is this how you spell it? No, I don't think so. All right. What are the other conditions? Healthy weight, overweight, okay. All right. Then the last part, if you are less between 25 and 30, what do? You say you are overweight. Not underweight, overweight. Else, if you're above 30, which is the last thing, what's your message should say? You are obese, right? Your BMI is, and then we will put obese. Okay. I think those are the only conditions, right? Those are only conditions. All right. So now my if statement says the following. After I calculate the BMI, if it's less than 19, this is what we get in the message, result message. If it's between 19 and 25, you will get this. If it is between 25 and 30, you will get this. Otherwise, you will get the word, if you're above 30, that means you're obese. And at the end, what do we display? We display the result message. result message. Now if we run it, let's try a different scenario. If I type in negative numbers, nothing should happen. Negative numbers are not allowed. If I type in for the weight, if I type in, let's say 70, and then I type in 180, if I click on BMI, your BMI is 21.6 and you're healthy. If I type in, if I increase the weight to 75, still healthy, but because it's between 25 and 19 and 25. If I increase it to 85, you're overweight. My BMI is higher. If I increase it to, if I made it 70 or 60, BMI is 18 and I'm underweight. You got that? So that is your program. Okay? To just summarize, if you look at the code, we followed the plan that we did at the beginning, which is what? You get the input, you convert if you need to, you do, here's the conversion also, you validate. If there is error, you display the error message. Here, if there is error, you display the error message. Else, you do some calculations and you display the result at the end. Is that clear? So that is your BMI program. I'll put it on your G drive and I'll probably post it on YouTube. Okay?